For the shape tool exercise, we're going to look at creating and editing shapes and paths. Starting off, you want to make sure you're on the drawing layer. This is where you should be creating all of these shapes and paths. So jumping right in, we're going to start with the square. For this square, you're going to need the rectangle tool. And you can see that when I clicked and held on this shape tool, it opened up this additional panel. So we're going to make sure that rectangle tool is selected. We're going to hover our mouse over this corner, click with our mouse, hold Shift on our keyboard, and we're going to drag out this shape. So this is a perfect square. You can tell because it has that magenta line going from corner to corner. If I were to release Shift, I could then make rectangles and all sorts of different imperfect shapes. But we want that perfect square. And if it's not quite aligned, if you zoom in with your magnifying glass or Z on your keyboard, you can see that it's not perfectly in alignment, and that's okay. You don't need to have these be perfectly aligned. These are just guides to give you a rough idea. So if you can still see some of the guide, that's okay. Next, we're going to make a rounded square. So we're going to come back over to the tool panel, click and hold, and get this rounded rectangle tool. Again, we're going to line up, click, hold Shift, and drag this out. And this tool automatically gives you rounded corners. You can change them up here on the top. You can see there's this rounded corner. You can change your corner types, but for this, we want the round. You can then go through and kind of change what you have here. You can also use the selection tool, which is the black arrow, and grab one of these little widgets and adjust your corners. You can also create this shape from a rectangle or a square using that rectangle tool. You can drag this out, and again, using either the selection tool or the direct selection tool, you can round the corners out. Our next shape uses the star tool. So I'm going to click and hold, grab the star tool, and drag out my shape. Now this tool will save any settings that you used previously. So as you're dragging out your star, if you have 5 points, that's okay. You can use your arrow keys on your keyboard to adjust how many arms of the star that you have. And for this shape, we want 4. I'm going to hold Shift so that it is perfectly up and down, release, and then use my selection tool to kind of drag it into place. You can also use your selection tool to rotate your shapes and to scale them. Holding Shift will keep them perfectly in proportion. So now I'm going to switch to the direct selection tool, and that's going to bring up these widgets on the outside as well as on the inside. We only want to change the widgets on the outside. So I'm going to click, hold Shift, and click on all of these outside widgets. Now once I have them all selected, I'll let go of Shift and I can drag these out as far as they'll go to create that nice star shape. And again, if you can kind of see the template behind it, that's okay. Next, we're going to make some circles and ovals. So we're going to click and hold and grab the ellipse tool. And just like we did with the square, we're going to click, hold Shift, and drag out our circle. And you can see that it's a perfect circle again because it has those smart guides. If for some reason you don't see the smart guides, you can go up to View at the top and down to Smart Guides. So now that we have made our perfect circle, we can grab our ellipse tool again, and without holding Shift, we can drag out this oval. And I'm just going to move this with the selection tool. This last shape is kind of an egg shape, but we still want to start with the ellipse tool. So I'm going to drag out this perfect circle. And using the direct selection tool, we want to move just this one anchor point. And you'll double click to isolate it, hold Shift, and drag up. And you'll notice that when you did that, you've got these little handles that come out, and you can move these around, but it's always best to just leave them kind of how they are, unless you really want to create kind of a weird and wonky shape. Our next tool is the polygon tool. So we're going to click and hold, select that tool, and again, we're going to hold Shift as we draw this out. I'm going to bring it down here and just rotate it until it is in alignment. And then we'll come in and we will scale it, remembering to hold Shift as you scale. For the triangle, there is no triangle tool. We are again going to use this polygon tool. And just like we did with the star, we can drag out our shape and use our arrow keys to remove sides or add sides. So for this one, we want 3 sides. I'm going to hold Shift just so that it flattens out that bottom, and then I'll drag it into place. The same thing for this shape. Grab that polygon tool, click and drag, hold Shift to get it to align, and drag it into place. So now we'll go back to the star tool, and we will get a 5-point star, hold Shift so that it's in alignment, and drag this into place as well. Grab our star tool, and we're going to add some points. Click Shift, and for this one, let's get it the size that we want. You'll notice that in addition to these little arrows, which will let you add and remove points, there's this little kind of circle here. This allows you to drag this out and widen the arms of the shape. So you could make it really, really thin, or you can thicken those up a little bit. So remember, just as close as you can, it does not have to be perfect. So we're going to create the shape again, holding Shift, drag out the arms, and this time we're going to round it. Now if you do not go through and select individual widgets, it will affect all of them. For our next shape, we again want to use this star tool. We're going to drag it out. I'll hold Shift, and we want to make sure that we have the 6 arms of the star. You can do that again with this little up and down arrow. And we're going to drag this out just a little bit. Now if we switch to the direct selection tool, which is A on your keyboard, and we don't double click on this widget, but we just click and drag, it will affect all of the widgets. So we can kind of get this to where we want all of these edges rounded, line it up as best we can, resize if necessary, and you can go back in and make changes. So if you're not really happy with how it's rounded, if maybe you went too far, you can always come back and change it. So that's all of our shapes created. We want to make sure that our shapes have this white fill with no stroke. So with any of these selected, if they don't look like this, you can go to your swatches panel and you can add a white fill with no stroke. Or you can do this from the toolbar over here to the left and have the white fill with no stroke. Next, we're going to look at the line segment tool. So this is just up from the shape tool. If you have this 2-sided or 2-columned tool panel, if you have the 1, it will be just above. So we're going to select this line segment tool, and here we want to give our line segment a white 2-point stroke. So I'm going to click, hold Shift, and drag. Now if we look over here at the tool panel, you can see that there is no fill and there is no stroke. You can go in here and give this a white stroke. However, it's going to give you the 1-point stroke that is just the default. You can go to your stroke panel, and if you don't see this anywhere over here in your panels, it's going to be under Window, down to Stroke. You can move this around if you don't like where it opened up. You can move this inside of your panels, or you can create it in its own little panel. Click on this little cheeseburger menu to show options, and that's going to give you all of the stroke options. So here you can see that it has a weight of 1 point. We want to increase that to 2. So we're going to take another stroke. We're going to drag this out. And this time we're going to add an effect to it. So we're going to go up to Effect. We're going to go down to Distort and Transform. And again down to Zigzag. Now it's going to open up this zigzag dialog box, and you can see that the stroke that we have isn't quite right. So let's add a few more segments, and then let's reduce the size. So for this, it looks like the size of 0.07 inches and 7 segments is what matches the template. From here you can hit OK. We're going to draw out another path. And again, we're going to go to Effect. And now you can see at the top, you can either apply zigzag, or you can just open the zigzag dialog box. If you apply zigzag, it will apply the exact same effect that you just used. So I'm going to do zigzag to open this dialog box. And you can see that it's almost what we want, except the template path is rounded. So under Points in the zigzag dialog box, you're going to hit Smooth. And that's going to round that out. So if we hit OK, grab our selection tool and just kind of move it, you can see that it's just about right, but it's a little bit too tall. These curves go down a little bit too much. So in the Properties panel, you can find your effect that you applied, and you can click on this to edit it. So we may want to bring this down, and it might be something that we type in manually. That looks about right. So for the rounded zigzag or the smooth zigzag, 0.05 with 7 ridges per segment, hit OK. This next path, again, we're going to draw out this line segment. And this time when we go to Effect, we're going to go to Distort and Transform and Roughen. Now, yours might look a little bit different. It will kind of change it depending on your settings. We can increase the size, decrease the size, make it relative or absolute, and add detail. So for this one, I don't expect it to be perfect. It won't exactly match, and that's okay. Just play around until you get something that is kind of similar, where the size is maybe 3%, add some detail, maybe go around, just something that shows me that you can add this roughen effect. For the next one, drag out your line, go up to Effect, and you can again apply roughen, the exact same settings that you just applied, or just do roughen to open that roughen dialog box. And just like the zigzag, we want to go to smooth this time, and instead of having these sharp points, kind of smooths those out. So we can play around with the detail here, maybe add some more. This one is looking pretty close to what is there, so we're going to hit OK. For our next path, again, we're going to grab that line segment tool, drag out our path, go back up to Effect, Distort and Transform, and this time we're going to do Twist. So here you can change the amount of twist that you see, and we want to adjust this until it's at 29 degrees, so you get that nice kind of up and down. So now that we have covered how to create and edit all of these shapes and how to create and edit and apply effects to these paths, you're going to create a few food items. So we have a pizza, a popsicle, and a hamburger. There's a little key up here. The dashed line is where you will use the shape tools. The straight solid lines are where you will use the pen tool or the line segment tool. Either will work to create those paths. In the swatches panel, there are some preset groups. So we have the pizza color palette, the popsicle color palette, and the burger color palette. You will use these to apply a fill or a stroke to all of these shapes. Let me go ahead and make this swatches panel a little bit bigger if I can. Let's bring it out into its own. Okay. So let's start with the pizza. And it might be a little bit tricky because you have elements that are overlapping that might disappear as you are creating them. So you can start with the background and have the crust. You can then have the cheese, maybe the pepperonis, and then the slices. Or you can work from the slices to the pepperoni to the cheese to the crust. It's really going to be about what is comfortable for you. And as long as you get this final result, it doesn't matter to me how you create these. So I'm going to start with these slices, and I'm going to use the line segment tool. I'm going to align my tool up, and then I don't want to have to draw out different lines every time. I want these to be consistent. So something you can do is copy, which is Command C or Control C if you're working on a PC, and paste in place, which is Command F or Control F. Grab this line that we just copied and pasted, hold Shift, and rotate it. Now you can leave these paths in white if you want, or you can come into the pizza color palette and you can apply that slice color. That might help you to differentiate where your paths are as opposed to what lines are on the template. Now I'm going to leave these two selected, and again I'm going to copy, Command or Control C, and paste in place, Command F or Control F. And then I'm going to turn these two, and I've got all of my slices made. So next I'm going to go to the pepperoni. I need the ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw out a circle that matches the template. I'm going to zoom in so I can see it a little bit better. And this stroke doesn't work for the pepperoni because we want it to match the sample image. So I'm going to come over here again to this pizza color palette, and I'm going to find the pepperoni color. It applied it to the stroke, but I want it to be in the fill. So I'm going to come over here to the tool panel, and there's this arrow that is swap fill and stroke. You can also do Shift X on your keyboard, and that will remove the stroke and add it to the fill. From here, you can either redraw out each individual pepperoni, but with that, you run the risk of the pepperoni being different sizes. You could have this selected and do Command C, Command V, or Control C, Control V, and paste them in place. Or you can hold Option and drag out a copy. You can do this for all of the pepperonis, and you can do this for multiple shapes as well. And then you can move them where they should go. So we'll get all of these pepperonis copied out. And if they're a little bit off, that's okay. Again, it does not have to be exact. So something I'm noticing as I'm creating these is that these slices should go over the pepperoni, and they also look a little bit too big. That stroke looks a little bit too thick. So I'm going to go to the stroke panel. So open that up, and it looks like it has a 1-point stroke. That looks about right. But now we want this to be overlapping the pepperoni. So with all of these strokes selected, I'm going to go up to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. And you can see that that brought these cuts, or these paths, over the pepperoni. So next I'm going to do the cheese. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, hold Shift, and you can see as I draw out this circle that it applied the stroke. It applied the last characteristic of the object that I had selected. So what I'm going to do is swap that, go over to the swatches panel, and find the cheese color. So there's pizza cheese. It's in front of everything, so we want to move it backwards. So we'll go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. Now we're going to do the same thing for the crust. We're going to draw out our circle. It's really handy if you have smart guides because it is telling me that I am in perfect alignment with these slices. It's intersecting. We're going to apply that pizza crust color. Object, Arrange, Send to Back. So now using our simple shapes and paths and lines, we have created the pizza. Next, we're going to move on to the popsicle. For this shape, we want to either start with these detail lines or start with the background color. For me personally, I think I would start with these detail lines. So I'm going to grab my line segment tool, line it as best as I can, and then I'm going to come down to the swatches. I'm going to find this popsicle color palette. There's the popsicle detail, and the popsicle stick. So this is the popsicle detail. And it looks like I need to increase this line significantly. So I'm going to go to the stroke panel, and I'm going to increase it until it looks to be about right. You can also drag this over and kind of overlap it or put it right next to it to see what looks right. Does not have to be exact, it just needs to be close. One thing you are probably noticing is that this is very square, whereas these are very round. That's when having these details showing comes in handy. The end of this path is going to be the cap. So you can see you have a couple options here, and if you change your cap to rounded, puts that nice rounded edge. That way you don't have to try and come in with the ellipse tool and try to make this perfect circle. You can just edit the path without it being too complicated. So now that I have these two details, I'm going to come in and make the popsicle. And I'm going to use the rectangle tool for this. I'm going to align it as best as I can. It's a little difficult with that really big stroke, so I'm going to get rid of that stroke. I'm going to put it to the fill. I'm going to go back to the swatches panel and select that popsicle. So it looks like it needs to be a little bit wider. Looks pretty good at the top and pretty good at the bottom. We're going to switch to the direct selection tool, and we're going to select these two top widgets and pull those down to create that nice rounded top. We can then select, deselect, and select these bottom two and drag these two up until it matches the template. Go up to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. So we're almost done. So here we want to use the shape tool again. I'm going to stick with our rectangle tool, I'm going to draw over this. Use my arrow keys to align it just a little bit, or if you want it to be exact, you can see in the center it says center, it has the little X. It's a little bit hard to read because it's pink on orange. Grab my direct selection tool and adjust just the bottom and apply that popsicle stick color. So now we're done with the popsicle. Let's move on to the burger. This one is going to be a little trickier because we have this sort of half circle. So again, we want to make sure that we're using this burger palette, and I'm going to start with the burger bun color. And for this, you'd think you would start with an ellipse, but I'm actually going to start with the rectangle tool. Using that direct selection tool, I'm going to grab these two corner widgets, pull them down into that perfect half moon kind of crescent shape. I'm going to do something similar down here. Grab these bottom two widgets with the direct selection tool and round out those corners. So next I think I'm going to do the burger patty. So again, this looks like a job for the rectangle tool. Drag this out. And now I want all of the corners to kind of round. So let's round these out and apply that burger patty fill color. I'm actually going to move this down a little bit just so I can see what I'm doing. And it looks like here we're going to use the line segment tool. We want to apply the ketchup color palette. And it looks like it's going to the fill instead of the stroke. So let's go ahead and swap those two. And then it looks pretty large here. So again, we're going to go to the stroke panel and we're just going to increase this. I think until it touches the bun. That looks pretty good. We're going to draw out another stroke. And this time we're going to give it the mustard color. There's the mustard color. That went to the fill, and we don't want that. So let's go ahead and switch that, get rid of that red fill. And it looks like we need to add the effect. So we're going to go to Effect, Distort and Transform, and Zigzag. And this is a smooth zigzag. And it looks like we need to decrease the size. Alright, that looks pretty good. But let's decrease the size of the stroke. I'm going to do that from the Properties panel because it's open and it has the option available here. So we'll bring that down. 8 looks about right. Can bring our hamburger patty back up. And that's looking good to me. Next I'm going to do the pickles because I want to be able to see these as I'm creating it. So again, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, grab these bottom two, and pull in. We want to make sure that we apply that, oh, I'm sorry, that's lettuce. Those are not pickles. So I'll apply that lettuce color palette, and I'm going to hold Option Shift, and I'm just going to drag out duplicates. Alright, let's make sure this is lined up, and that looks good to me. And for the last step, we're going to take our rectangle tool, we'll draw out our last shape, and we're also going to give it this ketchup color. Now it's overlapping our lettuce, so we're going to go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And if things are a little bit out of alignment, you are welcome to go in and make sure they are perfectly aligned. If the lettuce overlaps a little bit, that's okay. And now we have our burger that is missing its seeds at the top. So let's grab our ellipse tool, Let's draw on these seeds. Now you can move this out of the way, just off to the side, and you can drag these out, again holding Option and dragging with the mouse to duplicate these. And then you can drag this back into place. And there is our completed burger. So now that you know how to use these tools and lines, apply effects, apply color, fill, and stroke, I want you to create a food item of your own that is not one we have already created. So no pizza, no popsicle, no burgers. Use the tools and techniques that we've learned, create your food item, and then go ahead and submit this AI file or a PDF file to Canvas.